The email hit my inbox at 6:42 a.m., and I knew before opening it that my day was already ruined. The subject line read, "Formal HOA violation notice. No warning, no courtesy call. Just authority, attitude, and a signature dripping with confidence." The sender? Karen, not her real name, of course. But if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know the type. She was the kind of person who didn't knock, she reported. The kind who smiled while sharpening the knife. And the kind who had absolutely no idea what she'd just set in motion. The complaint was short, precise, and smug. According to Karen, my property was out of compliance, due to a minor landscaping issue that had existed for years. Without complaint, she demanded immediate correction, fines if I failed, and a full inspection of my property within 72 hours. It was written like a threat wrapped in legal jargon, and she clearly expected me to panic, apologize, and fall in line. What Karen didn't know was that I had kept every document, every approval, and every email the HOA had ever sent me. You see, years earlier, when I moved into this neighborhood, I played by the rules. I followed the process. I submitted plans. I got written approval. I even double-checked with the HOA before making a single change. I did everything right, not because I loved authority, but because I hated surprises. Karen's complaint wasn't just annoying, it was wrong. And for the first time, the power she thought she had was about to work against her. Instead of responding emotionally, I did something Karen never expected. I stayed silent, no reply, no explanation, no apology. I let her assume I was scared. I let her think I was scrambling. Meanwhile, I was preparing, digging through old emails, printing approvals, highlighting dates, cross-referencing bylaws. Because the thing about people like Karen is that they rely on fear and ignorance. Take those away, and they crumble fast. 3 days later, she scheduled the inspection. She CC'd the board. She sounded victorious, confident, almost excited. What she didn't realize was that by escalating the complaint, she had officially invited scrutiny on herself. And once the spotlight turns, there's no hiding the truth. The inspection day arrived quietly, almost anticlimactically, but the tension was thick enough to taste. Karen showed up early, clipboard in hand, chin lifted high, already writing before she even stepped onto my driveway. She didn't greet me. She didn't introduce herself. She walked straight toward my yard like a prosecutor approaching the jury box, convinced the verdict was already decided. This was her moment. At least that's what she thought. 2 board members followed behind her, less dramatic, clearly there out of obligation rather than excitement. Karen wasted no time. She pointed. She circled items on her clipboard. She whispered to the board members like she was uncovering a crime scene. Every few seconds she glanced at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for excuses, waiting for fear. I gave her none. I simply smiled and told her to take her time. That smile bothered her more than anything else. I could see it in her eyes. People like Karen thrive on reactions, and my calm didn't fit her script. When she finally announced that I was clearly in violation, she sounded relieved, almost triumphant. She explained how fines would begin immediately and how further action could follow. She spoke slowly, loudly, and with confidence, as if authority alone could make her correct. That's when I reached into my folder. I handed the board members copies of the original HOA approval letters, stamped, signed, and dated years earlier. I showed them the emails confirming compliance. I pointed out the exact bylaw sections Karen had misquoted in her complaint. The mood shifted instantly. The board members stopped nodding. Karen stopped talking. For the first time since she arrived, she looked unsure. She tried to recover. She said the rules had changed. Showed proof they hadn't. She claimed the approval was conditional. I showed the final confirmation. Each sentence she spoke unraveled faster than the last. The clipboard in her hands suddenly felt useless. Her confidence drained with every document placed on the table. What Karen didn't expect was that the inspection wasn't just about my property anymore. The board began asking her questions. Why was this complaint filed without verification? Why were old approvals ignored? Why was the homeowner threatened with fines despite clear compliance? Karen stumbled. She deflected. She blamed procedure. But procedure doesn't lie. Paperwork does the talking. By the time the inspection ended, Karen wasn't smiling. She wasn't confident, and she definitely wasn't in control anymore. The real fallout didn't happen in my yard. It happened a week later, inside a packed HOA meeting room where Karen assumed she could quietly smooth things over. She walked in stiff, professional, and overly prepared, carrying a folder twice as thick as usual. I could tell she had rehearsed. What she didn't realize was that the board had rehearsed too, without her. The meeting started normally. Budget updates, maintenance schedules, boring HOA routine. Karen sat upright, nodding along, pretending nothing was wrong. Then the board president cleared his throat and said, "Next item, review of a recently mishandled violation. Complaint." Karen's head snapped up. The room went quiet. My case was projected onto a screen. Emails, approvals, timelines, everything Karen had ignored was now displayed for everyone to see. The board president explained, calmly but firmly, how the complaint was filed without proper review, how threats of fines were issued prematurely, and how HOA authority had been misused. No names were mentioned at first, but every head in the room slowly turned toward Karen anyway. She tried to interrupt. The president stopped her. He explained that the HOA's credibility depended on fairness and accuracy, and that this situation had damaged trust. Then came the part Karen never saw coming. Another homeowner stood up, then another. Stories poured out, similar complaints, similar intimidation, similar errors. Patterns formed. The room shifted from confusion to realization. Karen's face flushed. She shrank in her chair as neighbors she once controlled now spoke openly. The power dynamic flipped in real time. Authority once assumed now had to be justified, and Karen had none left. The board announced an internal review. All recent complaints filed by Karen would be re-examined. Fines were suspended. Procedures were rewritten. And then, in the politest corporate language possible, the president said, Karen would no longer be handling enforcement duties pending investigation. It was quiet, clinical, devastating. Karen didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She gathered her papers and left early, avoiding eye contact. The same woman who once threatened homeowners with legal action now couldn't even look them in the eye. Her confidence was gone, replaced by the weight of consequences she never imagined. After the meeting, neighbors approached me, not to celebrate, but to thank me, not because I fought back aggressively, but because I stayed calm, documented everything, and let the truth surface on its own. Karen had relied on silence and fear. What exposed her was transparency, and the story still wasn't over. The final outcome came quietly, without drama, without announcements, and without the satisfaction Karen once craved. A month after that meeting, an email went out to the entire community. It was short, carefully worded, and impossible to misinterpret. Karen had resigned from her position. No farewell message, no explanation. Just a line thanking her for past service and wishing her well. For someone who once dominated every conversation, the silence was loud. Life in the neighborhood changed almost immediately. The tone of HOA emails softened. Warnings turned into questions. Enforcement turned into cooperation. People stopped feeling like they were being watched. And for the first time in years, meetings felt normal. Not tense. Not defensive. Just neighbors talking about shared spaces. Karen's absence wasn't celebrated. It was relieving. I never heard from her again. No apology. No explanation. And honestly, I didn't need one. The lesson had already been delivered in full. Authority without accountability always collapses. Power built on intimidation never lasts. Karen believed the HOA badge made her untouchable, but all it really did was put her actions on record. And records don't lie. What surprised me most wasn't her downfall, it was how common the story turned out to be. After everything settled, messages started coming in from people outside the neighborhood. Friends of friends. Strangers online. Everyone had a Karen story. Different names, same behavior. The pattern was always identical. Overconfidence, unchecked authority, and a complete underestimation of the person on the receiving end. The truth is, this was never about landscaping or bylaws. It was about respect. Karen didn't lose her position because she made a mistake. She lost it because she doubled down instead of listening. She escalated instead of verifying. She chose control over fairness, and once people stopped being afraid, her influence vanished. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's simple. Document everything. Stay calm. Know the rules better than the people enforcing them. You don't need to shout to win. You don't need to threaten to be taken seriously. Sometimes the strongest move is patience. Karen thought filing that complaint would remind everyone who was in charge. Instead, it reminded everyone that authority has limits. She didn't just regret complaining. She learned too late. That confidence without truth is the fastest way to fall. And that's how a single email, sent at 6:42 a.m., changed an entire neighborhood forever. Wow, what a story. If you loved seeing how Karen got her reality check, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another crazy HOA moment. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had a wild neighbor or HOA experience like this? I'd love to hear your story.